most powerful man in the world just sat down with Vladimir Putin for 3 hours in Alaska and they walked away with absolutely nothing to show for it. If you want to stay ahead of the biggest geopolitical stories shaping our world, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. Donald Trump promised he would end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly.
That was over 6 months ago. Yesterday's summit in Anchorage was supposed to be his big moment, his chance to prove he really is the ultimate deal maker. Instead, we got awkward silence and empty promises. Let me break down what actually happened, and more importantly, what it means for the war that's been raging for over 3 years. Trump rolled out the red carpet for Putin. Literally, fighter jets flew overhead. The two leaders shook hands like old friends. Putin even got a ride in the presidential limo they call the Beast. For a guy who's been treated like a global outcast since invading Ukraine, this was pure gold. But the warm welcome didn't translate into results. After nearly 3 hours of talks, both leaders faced the cameras. They read short statements, took zero questions, and basically admitted they got nowhere.
So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO.
Putin wasn't much better. He talked about eliminating the root causes of the conflict. That's diplomatic speak for Ukraine's needs to surrender. So, what went wrong? First, let's talk about what Russia actually wants. Putin's demands haven't changed much since this war began. He wants Ukraine to give up on joining NATO forever. He wants them to disarm. And he wants to keep all the Ukrainian territory his forces have captured. That's about 19% of the entire country. We're talking about Crimea, which Russia grabbed back in 2014. Most of the eastern Donbas region, parts of four other provinces. Putin also wants the West to lift sanctions, the same sanctions that have hammered Russia's economy for the past 3 years. Trump came into this meeting talking tough. He had threatened severe consequences if Putin didn't agree to a ceasefire.
It was always going to be I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders.
He had already slapped massive tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, 50% tariffs. That's essentially a trade embargo. Trump linked in a Fox News interview right after the summit. He said he might wait 2 or 3 weeks before imposing new sanctions. Maybe that's not exactly the decisive action he promised. Here's what's really fascinating about this whole situation. The meeting happened in Alaska, and the location choice tells everything about how Putin thinks. Alaska used to be Russian territory. Russia sold it to America back in 1867 for $7.2 million. Putin's team specifically requested Alaska as the venue. They said it was logical since the two countries are neighbors there, but there's deeper symbolism at play. This is Putin showing the world that Russia still matters, that he can sit as an equal with the American president on what used to be Russian soil. The optics were a massive win for Moscow. For 3 years, Western leaders have refused to meet with Putin. They've called him a war criminal. The International Criminal Court had issued an arrest warrant against him. Yesterday, he got the full presidential treatment on American soil. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky wasn't even invited to Alaska. He had to watch from the sidelines while two other men discussed his country's future. That's got to sting. Trump's team held a video call with European leaders earlier in the week. Germany's chancellor was there. So were the leaders of Britain, France, Italy, Poland, and Finland. They all basically begged Trump not to make any deals without including Ukraine. Looks like they got their wish, but probably not for the reasons they wanted. The truth is, this summit exposed some uncomfortable realities about Trump's approach to foreign policy. He's been talking about ending this war since before he took office. He suggested land swap, where Ukraine gives up territory in exchange for peace. He's even used the word divvy when talking about how Ukraine and Russia might split things up. But yesterday showed that Putin isn't interested in Trump's deal-making skill. At least not yet. Russia thinks it's winning this war. Putin's forces have been making slow but steady gains in eastern Ukraine. They've got more troops, more weapons, and they are betting they can outlast Ukrainian resistance. Why would Putin agree to a ceasefire ceasefire now when he thinks time is on his side. The economic pressure isn't working either. Yes, sanctions have hurt Russia's economy, but not enough to force Putin's hand. Russia's still selling oil to China and India. They're still funding their war machine. And here's the kicker. During yesterday's talks, Putin didn't just discuss Ukraine, he pushed for new business deals with America, space cooperation, technology partnerships, Arctic development projects. This guy's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. So, where does this leave Ukraine? In a really tough spot. Trump's already putting pressure on Zelensky to make a deal. His exact words to the Ukrainian presidents are that he got to make a deal. Trump also pointed out that Russia is a big power and they are not. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of Ukraine's position. This war's still raging while diplomats talk. Just during yesterday's summit, Russia launched 85 drone attacks on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine shot down 61 of them. Ukrainian forces hit back with their own drone strikes on Russian territory. People are still dying while politicians pose for photos. So, what has this summit really accomplished? Putin got international legitimacy, Trump got embarrassed, and Ukraine got a harsh reminder that their fate might be decided by other people. The next step is supposed to be a three-way meeting Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, all in the same room. Putin even joked that next time they should meet in Moscow. Can you imagine an American president visiting Moscow while Russia is still occupying Ukrainian territory? Trump said he might get a little hate for that idea. That's probably the understatement of the year. But here's the bigger picture. This summit showed that ending the Ukraine war isn't going to be as simple as Trump promised on the campaign trail. Putin's not desperate for a deal. He's got time and momentum on his side. Trump's threats haven't changed Putin's calculations, and Ukraine's got limited options as long as they are dependent on American support. So what do you so what do you think? So what do you think happens next? Will Trump follow through on his sanctions threats? Can Ukraine survive without stronger American backing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this analysis was helpful, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that matter.
What's your message to Vladimir Putin? Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine?
We are about to witness a repeat of one of the most dangerous diplomatic moments in recent history. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are meeting alone this Friday in Alaska. No advisors, no Ukraine. Just two men in a room deciding the fate of a war that's already killed hundreds of thousands. Sound familiar? It should, because we have seen this movie before.
President Trump is arriving right now at the presidential palace in Helsinki, Finland, for his first summit with President Putin.
July 2018, Helsinki, Finland. Trump walks out of a private meeting with Putin and does something no American president has ever done. He sides with Russia over his own intelligence agencies. On live television in front of the world, the question wasn't subtle. A reporter asked Trump about Russian election interference. Trump responds. Putin told him Russia didn't do it, and Trump believed him. Fiona Hill was Trump's top Russia advisor at the time. She was watching from the side of the stage. She later said she considered pulling a fire alarm just to end the press conference. Think about that. A senior White House official wanted to fake an emergency to stop her own president from talking. Now we are doing it again. Same format, same players, higher stakes. This Friday's meeting happens at Elmendorf Air Base in Alaska. The location isn't random. Alaska used to belong to Russia. They sold it to America in 1867 for $7 million. Putin knows this. Trump knows this. It's symbolism Putin loves. The White House is calling this a listening exercise. That's diplomatic speak for we have no idea what's going to happen. Trump himself said it's a feel out meeting. He'll know in the first few minutes if Putin wants a ceasefire. But here's what makes this terrifying Ukraine won't be there. The country actually fighting this war gets no seat at the table. Trump has already started talking about land swapping. He says there will be some territory exchanges between Russia and Ukraine for Ukraine's own good. The problem is Ukraine controls almost none of Russian territory. So what exactly would they be swapping? Vladimir Zelensky made his position crystal clear. Ukraine will not give land to the occupier. Period. European leaders agree you can't negotiate away someone else's country without them in the room. Putin sees this differently. He wants four entire Ukrainian regions Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. Russia already claims to own these areas. They just don't fully control them yet. Putin's demand would force Ukraine to abandon what military experts call their fortress belt. These are major cities with defense systems Ukraine has spent 11 years building. The timing isn't coincidental either. Russian forces are advancing in eastern Ukraine right now. They are gaining ground around the coal mining town of Dobropilya. Putin wants battlefield leverage before he sits down with Trump. The stronger his position on the ground, the more he can demand at the negotiating table. But let's talk about why Trump and Putin meeting alone is problematic. It's not just Helsinki, it's a pattern. In 2017, they met at the G20 summit in Hamburg, just the two of them and translators. Senior Trump officials later admitted they had no idea what was discussed. After one meeting, Trump reportedly asked his translator for his notes. That's not normal presidential behavior. Fiona Hill, who watched these dynamics up close, said it simply: Trump just wings it. He doesn't prepare like other presidents. Putin, on the other hand, loves this kind of sparring match. He prides himself on thinking quickly in these situations. It's a mismatch. One leader does his homework, the other improvises. In Helsinki, when they tried to make a deal, Trump came out claiming he and Putin agreed that US law enforcement could question the Russian intelligence officials who interfered in American elections. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Putin's version was different. He said Russia would get access to Americans who pushed for something called the Magnitsky Act. These are sanctions that target Russian officials for human rights abuses. Putin wanted to interrogate American citizens as payback. Trump apparently didn't understand what Putin had actually proposed. The deal went nowhere, but imagine if it hadn't. Imagine if Trump had accidentally agreed to hand over American citizens to Russian interrogation. That's the danger of winging it with Vladimir Putin. The current situation makes this even riskier. Putin is under an international arrest warrant for war crimes in Ukraine. Most of world leaders won't meet with him at all. Trump giving him this platform is already a victory for Moscow. European leaders are worried, really worried. They had a virtual meeting with Trump on Wednesday. According to diplomats who were there, Trump made some reassuring statements. He said Ukrainian territory isn't his to negotiate. He talked about supporting security guarantees for Ukraine. But Trump often tells different groups what they want to hear. European leaders got reassurance, but what will Putin hear in that room on Friday? The White House keeps lowering expectations. They are calling it a listening session now. Just Trump getting Putin's perspective. But that's exactly what happened in Helsinki, a listening session that turned into a diplomatic disaster. Benjamin Goodwin for Prism Strategic Intelligence makes a crucial point. This meeting is based on something totally impossible: land swapping that Ukraine and Europe will never accept. When your starting premise is impossible, how do you get to a successful outcome? You don't, which means this meeting serves someone else's purposes. Putin gets legitimacy. He gets to look like a world leader again instead of a war criminal. He gets photos with the American presidents. He gets to divide the West by creating doubt about American support for Ukraine. The venue selection tells its own story. The White House wanted to avoid hosting Putin on a military base. Bad optics, they thought. But they ran out of options. It's peak tourist season in Alaska. Nothing else was available that met security requirements. So Putin gets to visit on American military installation in territory that used to be Russian while under a war crimes warrant. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, said the only better place for Putin would be Moscow itself. That's a harsh statement from someone who worked closely with Trump. The contrast with how other presidents handle Putin is striking. When Joe Biden met Putin in Geneva in 2021, they announced the meeting 3 weeks ahead of time. Months of preparation followed. Biden's team planned everything down to the smallest details: what time each leader would arrive, how long each session would last, even what flowers would be on the table. Biden spent days in intensive preparation. He consulted other world leaders about how to approach Putin. By the time they met, American officials knew exactly what they wanted to accomplish. Trump's approach is the opposite: minimal preparation, no clear agenda, maximum unpredictability. That unpredictability cuts both ways. It can frustrate adversaries who prefer more structured negotiations. China's Xi Jinping reportedly wants extensive advance work before meeting Trump for exactly this reason. But unpredictability combined with limited preparation is dangerous when dealing with someone like Putin. He's prepared, he knows what he wants, he's skilled at these kinds of negotiations. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It's about whether aggression pays off in the 21st century, whether international law matters, whether smaller countries can count on American protection. Putin invaded in a democratic neighbor. He's deliberately targeted civilians. He's kidnapped Ukrainian children and sent them to Russia for re education. These are not accidents of war, they are systematic policies. If Putin gets what he wants in Alaska, if he keeps stolen territory and avoids accountability, what message does that send to other would be aggressors? To China looking at Taiwan, Friday's meeting isn't just about ending one war, it's about preventing the next ones. The danger isn't that Trump wants to help Putin. The danger is that Trump might accidentally help Putin while thinking he is solving problems. Good intentions combined with poor preparations and skilled manipulation can produce terrible outcomes. We have seen this before. We know how it ends. The question is whether we are about to see it again. Do you think this Alaska meeting will end differently than Helsinki? Or are we about to watch Trump hand Putin another diplomatic victory? Drop your predictions in the comments below.
US President Donald Trump is waging an aggressive tariff strategy against friend and foe alike.
When Donald Trump slapped a brutal 50% tariff on Brazil last month, he wasn't just targeting their exports. He was essentially weaponizing trade policy to pressure Brazil over their prosecution of Jair Bolsonaro. Think about that for a moment. The world's largest economy is now using economic warfare to interfere in another nation's judicial system. This story gets even more fascinating when you realize what's actually happening behind the scenes. And if you want to stay ahead of these major geopolitical shifts that are reshaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trump's aggressive tariff strategy might be achieving the exact opposite of what he intended. Instead of bringing countries to heel, he's actually pushing them together in ways that could fundamentally reshape global trade. Let's start with the sheer scale of what we are witnessing. Since what Trump calls Liberation Day back in April, the US has imposed new export duties on nearly 90 countries. We are talking about both traditional allies and nations that barely trade with America. The EU, which previously enjoyed single-digit tariffs, now faces 15% duties after they quickly capitulated rather than fight a prolonged trade war. Brazil is hitting back hard with no deal in sight. India just got slammed with tariffs that doubled from 25% to 50% because they won't stop buying Russian oil. China continues to refuse American demands, although talks are ongoing. Russia faces the threat of even tougher secondary sanctions if they don't agree to a Ukraine ceasefire. Now here's where Trump's strategy starts to unravel. Take Brazil's situation. That 50% tariff isn't really about trade imbalances. It's Trump's way of pressuring Brazil to drop their case against Bolsonaro, who is accused of plotting a coup. Brazilian officials have made it crystal clear they won't be bullied this way. The India situation is equally revealing. Trump claims they are funding Russia's war machine by buying oil, but India has a compelling counter-argument. European countries and even the US continue substantial trade with Moscow when it suits their interests. The oil price cap system that Western nations designed actually created incentives for countries like India to buy more Russian crude, refine it, and profit from the arbitrage. What's really striking is how Trump seems oblivious to the economic reality of tariffs. These are not taxes paid by foreign countries, they are paid by American consumers and businesses when goods arrive at US ports. We are essentially looking at what could be the largest tax increase on American consumers in modern history, and it's hitting Trump's own voter base the hardest. But the real strategic blunder goes much deeper. Trump is dismantling an 80-year-old global financial architecture that has been the foundation of American economic dominance since World War II. The Bretton Woods system, the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, the entire framework of international trade settlement, all of this is now under threat. Consider what's happening with BRICS. These countries represent 40% of global GDP, more than double the US share. They control the majority of the world's critical resources and manufacturing capacity. Previously, BRICS operated as a loose coalition, careful not to directly confront the United States. But Trump's direct targeting of Brazil and India is changing that calculation dramatically. The recent BRICS summit was telling. Member countries deliberately avoided mentioning the US directly, trying to maintain that cautious approach. But Trump's actions since then have created new incentives for deeper cooperation. Countries that were previously hesitant about BRICS financial mechanisms are now fast tracking central bank coordination and alternative payment systems. China's response has been particularly strategic. Beijing isn't pushing for confrontation. They are simply sitting back and watching as Trump isolates America from its own